Hello, everybody. My name is Purvi Sonia Dave, and this is FamTyme Talk podcast, where I talk to amazing parents, educators, healthcare professionals, and coaches all about families and how we can help them have a happy, healthy, strong bond with one another. And today I have an amazing guest. Her name is Kristin Sherry. She's an author of an amazing book called YouMap, Starting a Movement. And I'd love for you, Kristin Sherry, to introduce yourself and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Purvi. It's really nice to be here. I've really admired the work that you've been doing. I first got wind of FamTyme when you were starting. It was when it was in development, actually, before it was even an app, like when it was, a vision of yours, when you were working on it. And I thought, oh, what a great idea that is. And as soon as my kids get old enough to use it, because one can't read yet, just turned 6. So when they get old enough to use it, we're definitely gonna use it for our kids. My other kids are already grown, so it's too late for them to be like, no, I'm not doing that, Mom.
Yeah, I think they're a little bit out of their range. So tell me a little bit about the work that you do.
So I am a career consultant, and I have a very kind of wild and crazy backstory, so I won't bore you with the details, but I ended up really falling in love with helping people who are at a crossroads in their career life and helping kind of work that out. And eventually I ended up getting into product development, much like yourself, and creating a profile called YouMap to help people figure out really who they are instead of looking out into the world and what's out there and trying to stick themselves places. Like, who am I? And start there. And then what fits me, my strengths, my values, the skills I like using, and my personality and my interests. And so I really spent a lot of time doing product development and also certifying people to become YouMap coaches and workshop facilitators. So that's how I spend the majority of my time, and writing books and speaking about helping people discover themselves. So that's me.
Amazing. I think that's such an important thing. Instead of trying to stick yourself into something just to say, okay, this is it. But we all have something inside of us that that we're great at, and finding a way to map that for ourselves and living our life to what our potentials are is such an amazing gift that you're giving to people. So thank you for starting this movement.
Yeah, you're completely right. Everyone's a masterpiece, and people kind of shy away from owning that when I say that. You're a masterpiece. Everyone is a masterpiece because no one has the same strengths and abilities and talents and personality and life experiences. When you combine them together, we're really like a one infinity person. There's no one like us or ever will be like us again. And so we have gifts to give the world. And that's why I wrote the book YouMap, because I wanted people to discover what they did best that other people needed most, so they wouldn't, live their whole life and not bless the world with those gifts.
There's this quote that I love by one of my amazing mentors that he doesn't even know he's my mentor. He's no longer in this world, but his work always lives on, Wayne Dyer. And
Yeah.
Love what he says, don't die with your music inside of you.
That speaks to me.
And we all have something inside of us that is waiting for us to share with the world. And it's so important that I love that you're helping more people wake up to that music and allowing them to share that.
Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about your family. I know you said you have 2 older ones and then 2 little ones. And how's that dynamic?
So interestingly, I have a 22-year-old son. He's already on his own. He lives in Nashville, and he's working and finishing his last year of college, and he's got a place with his friend, a roommate. So he's starting his life in Nashville. That's where he plans to stay. And then I have an 18-year-old who's moving out this weekend to start university. Yeah. And then I have they're both boys. And then I have a 6-year-old daughter, and it was kind of like, oh, I'm 40. I can't have kids anymore, so I don't need to take these birth control pills. And so we started over by accident. And once we had the one, my husband and I said, well, we might as that story of telling him I was pregnant was hysterical, but I won't go into that. But deer in the headlights kind of sums up his reaction. And then we decided to have another one since my 6-year-old is used to having siblings in the house because they were 15 and 12 when she was born. We decided we should probably, maybe have another one so
companion.
It would affect her a lot more when they moved out and we're gone. So we thought, let's have a little expansion of our family again. And it was the best decision we ever made because they fight, but they're like best friends too. And so it's great.
Oh, they're beautiful. I've seen your daughters. Oh my God, they're so gorgeous. So I'd love to know from your perspective in terms of the different parenting challenges that you've experienced in the different within the years of your oldest to like now your two youngest.
That's been really, really interesting. There's two really interesting things about parenting in gaps like that with the 19 years between the first and the last, because I went through the cohort with moms the first time, and now I'm going through it again with moms with these two. And so I noticed huge differences generationally between my first and the second two. First of all, the helicopter parent thing has gotten really out of control. Like I go on message boards and I'm in a mom group, a Charlotte moms group, and there was a mom posting about how upset she was that the teachers this year in her kids' class weren't all giving her their cell phone. And I'm thinking, why do you need your kids' teachers' cell phones? And she was like, what if I have an emergency? And it's like, well, if you have an emergency, your child's not with you during the day, right? But if you have an emergency, call the school. And they're not going to be answering their phone if they're in class with the kids. And so she was like, well, if I have an emergency at night, and I'm like, well, your child is with you, not at school. So it just didn't make any sense. Wow. But I thought it was really kind of crazy, some of the expectations that parents have about being able to be in constant contact with their kids every minute. It was not like that with my first two coming up because we didn't have smartphones then, right? So that's really different. And just how overly scheduled kids are is really kind of crazy to me, because I just look around thinking, boy, I don't really fit in as much parenting this time around than people that were more like-minded with me the first time around. But I'm sticking to my guns on because it worked out well with my boys. So I'm going to kind of stick to the plan of not having them have overly scheduled lives.
I think that's one of the topics that I've shared in one of my groups is the overly scheduled kids and how that impacts them, creates more stress and more anxiety for them because they're not able to keep up with the demands of all these activities that parents are scheduling for them. And they never have time for creativity, just being themselves, and just I think parents want their kids to experience everything, and that can backfire in some ways because we don't allow them to really do one or two really good things that they could possibly do really well because you're throwing too many things into the mix because they're like, oh, I want them to do piano, I want them to do ballet and all like 20 different things, and this poor kid just wants to sometimes breathe.
See, I parent from the unfold versus mold philosophy. So a lot of us are looking to mold our kids. So we're going to put them in a bunch of things, but I believe that the gifts are going to unfold. So if your child has a gift for singing or drawing, those are going to naturally surface because we're born with our gifts. So I'm not trying to force them into, well, you're going to become a company ballerina or this or that, because you'll start to notice the gifting. So my oldest didn't start any activities until he was 12 when he asked to play guitar. I think he was 12 or 13. And so he went into lessons then, but we had all those years of it just being family time. And my second, he did drums for a little while at the same time, but then he didn't want to continue with that. And then he started playing football in high school. So that became quite a commitment, but he was already a teenager by then. And
Mm.
they are very well adjusted, self-confident, independent thinking kids. You can't take too much credit for how your kids turn out because kids that don't get into trouble have naturally compliant personalities. So, and you can have more of a kind of a dominant or rebellious personality. So I don't take a whole lot of credit for my kids turning out well. We can certainly damage our kids and create trauma in our kids, but as long as you plant them in loving soil and hug them every day and tell you love them,
Mm.
I don't know, there's really, I think it kind of, life takes care of itself as long as they're planted in loving soil.
You solve the mystery. Just love them. Yeah, I think that's so important. And I love what you say about allowing their gifts to unfold naturally instead of trying to mold them, because that is so important. Because you're right, every single person has some sort of quality or skill sets that they are innate with, that they come with. And it's just, guiding them and allowing them to experience and find those gifts themselves is such an important thing of letting them unfold naturally.
Yeah, I had a really great childhood. I'm very thankful for that. My parents gave me a ton of space to explore and create. I read a lot of books. I played outside constantly. I was always outside, riding my bike or climbing trees. And I had a lot of time and space to really just kind of explore and really create. And I was really thankful that they weren't putting me in all these structured activities, that I just got to really just be myself and just really enjoy the freedom of my childhood. I really, really liked that. And my parents didn't tell me, you need to do this and you need to do that. They just modeled the way they wanted me to be. So if they wanted me to be patient, they would be patient. If they wanted me to be forgiving, they would be forgiving of me. If they wanted me to not yell and lose my temper, they would demonstrate those behaviors. So I didn't get a whole lot of telling. I got a lot more demonstrating and showing from my parents. And I felt like those were strong lessons. But I do think there are conversations we need to have with our kids. So my oldest, I started having conversations when he was about 5, that when he goes into school, people are going to be mean to you and say awful things to you and even bully you and be aggressive towards you. And I wanted him to know that there are kids in the world who are in families that maybe they aren't shown as much love as he is, or and people hurt people. So sometimes those kids are hurting because they're being hurt. And I tried to talk to him about having compassion for hurt people who lash out and hurt other people. But I wanted my kids to realize this is not about you. This is a person who's hurting inside and they don't know how to deal with it. So it just comes out to you. And my mom told me a really cool story. She said when she was a kid, she was made to feel very special because there was 19 years between her and her oldest sibling, just like we have in my family. Yeah, really interesting. My grandma did the same thing. And so because she was the baby girl, she had adult married siblings, twin sisters that were married already. And so they doted on her as a baby. And so she said when she went to school and people started to say mean things to her, she thought, well, that's not true. So they must be wrong. And so the thing is, if you strengthen your kids by first loving them and pointing out things that are great about them, not shallow things like they're beautiful or they're smart. They can't do anything about being smart or beautiful. Right. They were born that way. But praising them for really not giving up on an activity or really putting in their best effort, right, or pushing in and figuring something out, or not giving up when we went on a 2-mile hike that my daughter said, I'm not going to quit. I can do this. I praised her for that, So I think if you really help them build it's an inside job first, right? You help them build that inside, and then you focus on the outside of what are some things they're going to encounter in the world and how might they deal with that? How can they find their voice?
Amazing. Yeah, you've knocked out so many amazing points, because I've been thinking in terms of a lot about diversity and inclusion. And we talk about that in the workspace and at schools, But I'm wondering on your perspective on what we can do to create more diversity and inclusion in the homes, of having those topics, open topics, of teaching kids that there's a lot of different world of families nowadays. There's blended families, there's kids that have parents of same sex, there's single parents, there's just, so many variety of different types of upbringings nowadays than 40, 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I think diversity and inclusion should start at home, and
Mm-hmm.
parents teaching kids that there's all different types of people, and how do we go about teaching them how to respect and appreciate every single person, whether they look different, whether they may be differently abled, whether they have different parents or anything. Like, what's your advice on helping parents create more diversity and inclusion at home?
So the first thing is you have to be very intentional, and we are very intentional. So we wanted our kids to be in diverse activities in schools and things like that. So what we do is we go to a church called Transformation Church that is a multicultural, multi-generational, mission-shaped community of people. So there are young and old people serving there from multiple different backgrounds. My pastor is Black, his wife is white. We have a home group that we go to, and it's extremely ethnically diverse, and you have people with very diverse backgrounds, single people, married people, divorced people, people who have tons of trauma in their background, people who have not. It's really a diverse community of people. And so my kids are used to being around people who are different than them, socioeconomically, ethnically, age-wise. So for them, they can interact very easily. One of the things that it's not that I don't like it or that I would change it, but this cohort style of education where they have little kids and they're all through their life spending the majority of the time with people all their own age. And they don't learn to communicate with people that are younger or older. So we make sure that we provide that in our lives. So my kids are used to touching the skin of people of different ethnic backgrounds, and that's very familiar to them and not weird for them. But we've been very intentional in making sure that we had a diverse life. And of course, I have very diverse friends. I have transgender friends and lesbian friends and gay men friends, and I have conservative Christian friends, I have Muslim friends, I have friends like from all different backgrounds. And so I think my kids are really used to seeing that too. So it was interesting because I am ethnically half white and half indigenous Haudenosaunee Mohawk. And so my daughter has gotten my daughter is darker brown than I am. She's dark skinned. She's not tan. She's dark skinned. And my other daughter is pale as can be, blue eyes and white skin. If you see them side by side, they have very different skin. And my 3-year-old said to me today, she said, are you peach? And I was like, I don't know. She's talking about my skin. I'm like, I don't know. Do you think I'm peach? And she's like, I'm peach. And she's like, Catherine's brown, about her sister. And I said, and it's funny because they have the same mother and father, but the genetics, because I'm mixed biracial, the genetics, just kind of is weird that way, what gets passed down. So they're aware of those things and those differences, but they don't think those differences are bad. They just are. And I think that they learn through messaging, even subconsciously, when people say things like, oh, those people, or things that you don't even realize, you're subordinating people, right, and not sending a message that we're all equal of value as human beings. So I think sometimes people will unintentionally plant messages in their kids that differences are bad.
Oh my God, you've nailed it. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just all about creating that environment. What the parents practice is what the kids will learn. And I think just even if a parents are not able to have the diverse group of friends or anything like that. But at least if a child sees, oh, Tony has two dads as in his family, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just how a parent approaches that and saying, acknowledges, like, yeah, there's sometimes two moms, there's sometimes two dads, or sometimes only one mom, one dad, you know. And it's just every upbringing, every child, every family is different, and just teaching them on how to be able to understand those different types of environments, because in our world today there's so much more division and instead of inclusion. And I think it's such an important power that parents have to be able to teach that to these younger generations, of creating more inclusions and more embracing the diversity. I mean, America is such a huge melting pot of so many wonderful cultures. And I look at that in my own upbringing, because everybody in my family is all Indian, you know. And I'm like always trying to surround myself with all different types of variety of people, as I like to call it, or variety.
That's hard, right? You might live in an area that's not particularly diverse, and it doesn't mean that you need to uproot your whole family if you like where you live, but you can definitely have open dialogue and conversations. One of the things that I tell my kids, my older ones, I did more, because my youngest, I'm just starting these conversations because they don't really understand them. But one of the things that I shared with my kids is, it is perfectly okay to have your set of values that you live by, but where we have to be careful is not imposing our values onto other people. I read on Facebook yesterday something that just floored me. This guy said that he despises families that have more than two children because they don't adopt the other two, that they don't have two biological children and then adopt the other two if they want four children, because they don't have homes and whatnot. And I just thought, I thought to myself, I know that you mean well by that. I did write a little comment that just said, in just my experience, I find that it's just best to allow people to make decisions that they feel are best on them, that best for them based on their values versus us, imposing our values onto them. I really believe strongly in the philosophy of live and let live. I just don't see the need to observe how other people make their choices and inject my opinion into that.
Yeah.
My opinion doesn't matter.
Right.
It matters in my own life, my own family, my own choices, but
to impose that on others is just what's the need for that? I mean, it's their life, whatever their choices are, let them, live.
Why am I so invested in? Why do you have to be so invested in the decisions other people make?
And in social media, we can inject our opinions on everybody, apparently.
Yeah. I really have the philosophy that we win people over by our love and our actions towards them, not by what we say or tell them. And so if you want to influence someone's life, you do that by being an example.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Yeah, you're right. I mean, there are times people mean well and they have good intentions, but it's not about what you want. It's about what's right for that person and meeting them where they're at.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
If we could just get that right, stop judging people and stop imposing our values onto other people, our world would have much less division.
Hallelujah. I think, that's a recipe. Hopefully we can get there one day. I'm just curious, in terms of, in today's day and environment, technology is such a huge part in the homes. And so many parents struggle, in a sense, in terms of screen time and what's enough, what's not, when to provide cell phones. And how do you find the balance in still embracing technology, but also having some sort of a regulation, or just moderating it, where it's where technology is not using you, but you're using technology and teaching that to your kids.
Yeah, I think that one of the things we need to recognize as parents is we have a problem too. Like the adults have a problem with technology. We spend a lot of time focusing, and we definitely need to monitor that. I'll talk about that in a second. But a lot of times we can talk about kids and technology in this kind of really preachy way. Meanwhile, we're scrolling Facebook every second and not listening to our kids, and we're, you know what I mean? Like we're not practicing what we're preaching.
Right.
So it really has to start with our own example. And are we taking our cell phone everywhere we go and carrying it in our hand everywhere we go, and then telling our kids they shouldn't be doing that? And are we texting and driving and doing all these things and telling our kids don't text and drive? Because they're really going to model what they see us doing. So we have to start cleaning up our own act first. Then I personally, again, I don't impose my values on other people, but I made a decision that my kids didn't need cell phones when they were in elementary school. And so when they turned 13, I let them each get a cell phone, the older boys. And I just was very lucky that they, maybe because they're boys, they just really didn't have like an addictive personality with their phones. My 18-year-old doesn't have a Facebook account. He closed his Snapchat. He has an Instagram. I think he's posted twice on it ever. He's not a heavy social media user because he's a private person, and he doesn't think it's wise to put a lot of your business on the internet. So and then my oldest has very moderate use as well. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that's when they grew up and it's really taken a hold now, and I don't know, but they have a lot of other things they do. They spend a lot of time in real life with friends.
Right.
So they're engaging, and then they both play instruments. So they're spending a lot of time on their craft. My 18-year-old plays bass and drums and guitar. So he's creating music, and so he's got other interests, not just kind of sitting on a cell phone. So just encouraging those interests of theirs. But I think what's really important with the devices is not turning it into a battle, but I use the device as a reward. So, okay, you can, if you eat all of your vegetables, we can watch 2 videos before bed. So I'll use it as a reward, but we do not allow devices in the mornings. So you have to kind of have a plan. I guess that's what it amounts to, is if you don't have a plan, you don't know what you're trying to stick to. So we have no electronic devices in the mornings, and we also really limit them on weekends because that's family time. And so that's just kind of helps. And then we'll often, when they've been at school all day, maybe let them watch a movie or choose. You can have 30 minutes of YouTube Kids or watch a movie.
Right.
And we let them choose. So that's how we manage it.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, so much of what kids learn is how parents model what they want the kids to be doing. So if you're telling them no phone or no tablet during dinner at the dinner table, but then you're checking your emails or replying to something, I mean, it's just well, why are you telling me not to do something and you're also not following your own rules? So you're right. Parents have to model what they say. It starts with ourselves first, and then having those plans of action in terms of when is the right time, so that way all the other work is done, and now this is your reward to be able to go watch that TV show or go play on the video game or something. So it's not like you're taking it away. It's still a sense of enjoyment for them.
Yeah, and I also have proactive conversations. This was an awkward thing to discuss, but I told my boys as teenagers, pornography on your phone or on your computer will destroy your life. It seems like very harmless, but I let them know. The women, and largely women, that are in pornographic movies and videos, I did a paper on this in college. 97% of them were sexually abused by a family member or a friend of a family member in childhood. And so they have some dysfunctional views of sex because of, and not everybody does that goes through that, of course. You can heal from that, but these particular women have not. And so I let my boys know that if you consume pornography, you're contributing to the abuse of these women. And I'm like, let's keep it real here, you know, that these are very hurt people, and you're capitalizing on that. And that really got my son's attention. And I said, not only that, I told them about studies that men have erectile issues getting aroused when they consume a lot of pornography. Then they have difficulty getting aroused with their own wife. So I read a study to them about that, to my 18-year-old. I know it was awkward territory to go into, but I'm like, you got to like deal with this stuff. And then I also told them about how it affects your compassion for women when you are doing technology, and it can destroy your family. Right. So I really shared the dangers. I know a lot of people are very cavalier about pornography, but I believe it's very destructive to families.
I think it's amazing that you're having these open conversations about these difficult topics that most parents would find hard to share and talk about, but they're so important because so many people struggle with those challenges. And I mean, if you're teaching them from, you know, when they're younger and explaining them, like what are the pitfalls of this type of industry and what, how to just educating them is so important. It's just having this.
I had a conversation with my 6-year-old last weekend, telling her, even though she doesn't use social media and even though she's not on devices unmonitored, I've started the conversation that, and I'm not using this as a fear tactic, but I'm like, because the internet is anonymous, I explained to her that sometimes someone could pretend that they're a 13-year-old girl on the internet and it could be a 45-year-old man. So I started to have conversations that she should never go to meet someone in person that has invited her to come see them on the internet. I've started that conversation with her now, and she's 6, and I'm going to continue to talk about that with her. So by the time she gets to 12 or 13, this is really kind of in her mind. But I don't like to use fear tactics like, you have to stay away from chat rooms because it's full of monsters that are going to hurt you. I just say the world is full of wonderful people. There are more good people in the world than bad, but there are few people in the world who will seek to do bad things. And so I want her to still be trusting. It's a real balance, you know?
Yeah, oh my God, I love it. You're right. It's not about instilling fear, but it's just about knowledge and educating that there's amazing people in this world, but there are also some bad that we want to be careful of, watch out for. And it's such a great way of teaching. It's a wonderful teaching moment, and it's something that'll probably be engraved inside of our head, realizing like, okay, mommy taught me this, and I'm going to be more careful and more vigilant. I love it. So one of the biggest skill set kids growing up in today's environment is going to be interpersonal communication skills. And that's something that so many kids are lacking at times. I'm curious, what can more parents do in the homes to help kids hone in on that skill set?
So what I did was, when each of my kids turned 7, I gave them a wallet and I started to give them a very small allowance. And anytime we would go to a store that they wanted something to buy, they would have to do the transaction and speak to the person. And I would pay for my stuff separately, and they would get whatever it was, and they would have to have that interaction with the person. So that started to, and then I never order for them in restaurants. As soon as they're old enough to speak to someone else, my 6-year-old has been ordering for herself in restaurants for the last 2 years now. So I make them look at the waiter or the waitress and communicate to them what they want from the menu. I never order for them. So there are small social ways through transactions that you can help them. The other thing is, I don't do things for my kids that I think they should do for themselves. So my son, when he was getting ready to go to university, had to call the doctor to get immunization records. And I said, I'm not doing that for you. I want you to call. you to talk to the person who answers the phone, you to go down there to the doctor's office, interact with that person and get your records and come home. And that's what he did, because I said, I'm not doing it for you. There are a lot of things I think that we do for our kids because it's faster and easier if we do it, but it's really good practice. And everyday social interactions, we can let them speak for themselves instead of us speaking for them.
Wow, those are some amazing tips, because you may not always think that you're just trying to help them. And yeah, I mean, parents mean well, they're just trying to help them, but at times we're kind of hindering them from learning. It's a great learning ability for them to do things for themselves, to fend for themselves instead of being at their rescue every single time.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
I encourage my son when he makes his haircut appointments to not use the online app, but to call and speak to the person and make his appointment, because the kids don't have to use the phone for barely anything because they can use the online form. So I always say to my son, call and make your appointment instead of just using that online form.
Love it.
So he
Yeah.
does.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading a study about how kids text about almost 150 to 200 texts a day, and they hardly ever pick up the phone nowadays to talk to one another. And I was just like astounded by that study, that we're losing that verbal communication, because human beings, we're social creatures. We want to feel the vibe around others and communicating. And if it's just through technology, we're losing a really important component of communication.
Yeah, I think really encouraging our kids to spend time with their friends in person is important, because it's really easy for them to lay on their bed and just snap and Insta.
Right.
And they feel like they've had social interaction, but really they've just been interacting with their device. So I have made it very easy once my son got his driver's license. If he wants to go with friends somewhere to do something, I always say yes. I want to know where he is and who he's with. I mean, now that he's 18, he doesn't have a curfew anymore, but he doesn't take advantage of that. He always comes home at a reasonable hour. I believe in a balance between, I don't think that tightening the screws on our kids really helps, because I think then when they go to college, they go fly off the rails because they had no permissiveness at all. So I try to create expectations and then give them a lot of leeway. So I don't use nanny software to read things on their phone. I give them privacy, but I set very clear expectations and guidelines around things. And I will, we never bring our cell phone to the dinner table, and or at restaurant tables, we have parameters that we live by. But I also believe in my kids having privacy because I respect them as people. I know that is a controversial topic, that some parents think, no, I need to read their diaries and check their emails and read their texts and all, because I need to make sure they're not doing something they shouldn't. But I believe my kids appreciate that I respect them as people. And so they have not disappointed me in that way.
Well, you bring up an important topic, in a sense, about reading kids' diary. I don't agree with that, but FamTyme is a little bit around that, where it helps kids journal and share how they're feeling throughout the day.
That's different. I'm talking about things where people have an expectation of privacy and then it's being violated. I definitely believe in openness. And so those are not the same thing.
So that's what I wanted to get to, is that my goal with FamTyme is more like parents creating that open environment, telling them, hey, I want you to use this. I want you to, communicate on your own time, however you're feeling. Just share, release anything that's going on inside your head. Don't hold it in. Because it's an outlet for them if they're not always able to verbally communicate what they're experiencing. And trust me, I know how it feels about holding stuff in, and it just bursts when you can't
Mm-hmm.
hold it in anymore. So just creating that open space, open environment, giving them the freedom, but also giving parents the awareness of letting them, showing how their kids are doing really well, or if they're being challenged in something,
Mm-hmm.
being aware of it and just guiding them in their own way, helping them find creative solutions to their own problems, instead of just jumping in and saying, oh, let me help you, or let me solve this for you because I don't want you to struggle.
Yeah. I think sharing our own struggles is really important too.
Mm.
So we have it all together now, right? At this age, we actually do as parents, like, why would you do that? How did you not know that was so foolish? What were you thinking? And all these things come across like we have it together. I have been very transparent with my kids about mistakes that I made when I was young and what I've learned from that. I never wanted them to have the impression that I had it together as a kid. I was this perfect 16, 17, 18-year-old. And now here I am, this perfect, which I don't think so, obviously, but perfect adult. I was very transparent with my kids about mistakes I made, about the time I was 16 and told my mother I was sleeping at Kelly's house, and Kelly said she was sleeping at my house. And we had to sleep on the cold ground in a backyard, and it rained, and it was just like the dumbest decision. It sounded like it would be fun, but it was just awful. And so I'm open about some of the stupid things I did when I was a teenager to them.
Oh, there's so much power with that when you are open and vulnerable and sharing. I'm a human being just like you. I was a kid one day, and I've made mistakes, and I want you to hopefully learn from some of my own mistakes that you don't have to make. And I mean, we're all going to make mistakes, and that's part of life, and we learn from them. But nobody's perfect, and when parents try to not acknowledge their own mistakes, I'm not saying we have to indulge everything.
Right. I'm tactful for sure.
Right. Right. But I mean, I think there's so much power in terms of embracing that vulnerability and teaching. Those are wonderful teaching moments for kids. Like my mom's not perfect. She's, done stuff or whatever, but at least, I think sharing those important moments are key points for kids. Wow. So tell me, if you have one parenting tip that you think is the most important parenting tip that you live by that would benefit parents today, what would that be?
That I live by. So I have a tip that I struggle with that I'm trying to get better at, and then one that I live by. So the one that I live by is be very careful of your words, because you can't take them back. And so speaking life and love into your children. And if you get frustrated and you say things like, you're so stupid, or, because you're so frustrated, you really need to just not talk and decide that I'm going to give my child my thoughts about what happened later after I've calmed down, because you can't speak hurtful words. It shapes their self-esteem, and then they make really bad choices for their life because they don't value themselves as people. So we really have to not tear our kids down. So I'm very careful and accountable for every word that comes out of my mouth. Sometimes it comes out louder than I want, admittedly.
We're human.
But I don't ever attack their character. And that's really important. And then the second, I know you asked for one, but the second tip is listen. Listen to your kids. We have so many competing things for our attention, whether it's our phone or the show we're watching on TV or our thoughts. Really just stop and listen, because that's something that I've had to, that's the one I'm trying to do better at, is not, well, I'm just reading this article, go ahead and tell me. Stop reading the article and be present.
Wow. Yeah, those are really important tips. And I've heard, like, if you scramble the word listen, it turns into silent.
Oh, yeah.
And it's such an important, just being there and just being observant and allowing them to express themselves is such a valuable gift for them to just feeling acknowledged.
Yeah, you need to be a safe place for your kids, because if they can't come and talk to you about things without fear of judgment or condemnation, or that you won't listen, they're going to turn other places, and those places may not be good for them.
Yeah, that's my main mission with FamTyme, is to help parents nurture that bond when they're young, where they're more open to being, the parents are their world. I think there's the strongest bond between a child is with their parents.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter what happens, their teachers will come and go, friends will come and go, but parents are something that's the constant, the consistency in their life. And if we can help more parents nurture and have that strong bond, they're gonna just thrive in this world. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's really interesting. A lot of parents will make their children the center of the family, and I feel very strongly against that. When I was a child, my mother told me, your father is my number one priority, but I love you and your brother very, very much. But someday you're going to go off and have your own families, and it's going to be me and your dad again. And so we need to be plugged into one another. And I felt such security in that, knowing that my parents had a strong foundation. And so my kids know the same. Like, my husband is number one, and they are a very, very close second. And I love them so much, and they know that. But I think what happens is a lot of times parents make the kids the king and queens of the household. And then the family, the marriage breaks down. And that's really and if not everybody's married, so that's okay. But if you are married, that partnership is the foundation for your family. So when when your marriage falls apart, your kid's foundation is falling apart. So I would caution people to keep your spouse that number one, and kids, very, very close second.
That's such an important fact. Yeah, you're right. That's such an important factor, because your spouse and you are like the foundation that's holding up the home together. And if you don't have your foundation structure right, then everything else can easily crumble. So
yeah, because when you get the divorce, and I'm not being judgmental of this. I actually was married before, so I have been divorced. But when you get divorced, then you have all of the issues that creates for your kids. So in our intention of making their lives perfect and focusing on them, we actually undermine their foundation by not keeping our family strong. And then you have them having separation anxiety because they're afraid you're now going to leave them too. Kids don't understand if you can divorce if you can divorce dad or mom, then I'm going to do something to upset you, and you're not going to love me, and then you're going to leave me too. Kids actually think that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, many kids struggle because of divorces, and they have that going on as adults. And their mentality of relationships and how they see it it plays a lot on their subconscious.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that like people should never get divorced. I'm saying
No,
that
yeah.
if you're in the marriage, make sure you keep that relationship strong. That's all I'm saying. Because clearly, if you're being abused, you should leave that situation.
Yeah. There's always exceptions. Every situation is different, but how we handle that situation is what's going to be the factor for the child, and if it's healthy or unhealthy. Kristin, I so genuinely appreciate you. I'm so grateful for you joining. If our audience wants to get a hold of you and learn more about the work you do, can you let them know where they can find you?
Yeah, my personal website is kristinsherry.info. My work website is myyoumap.com, and you can always reach me on LinkedIn, Kristin Sherry, linkedin.com/in/Kristin Sherry.
Awesome. I'll put all that information in the show notes. So if people want to get a hold of you and contact you, they can reach you. And thank you so much for sharing some amazing insights. And I can't wait for your girls to be old enough to use FamTyme and just really help you create more of those stronger bonds that you already have.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to using it as well.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.